Hello again. I'm back with another clock, and if you've seen any of my earlier videos, you might recognize this one. It started out as a New Haven alarm clock. I found it at a thrift store, an antique store down in Florida, a place called Jeff's Antiques. They're out of business now, but it was a really great store, almost like walking into a museum. And what I liked about this one was not only had I never seen one like it before, but has an Art Deco look, has a nice metal case. I like the color of it. And although the seller thought that it was a working clock, we plugged it in and it wasn't working, which was perfect for me. And once I got it home and started to take a look at it, I discovered that the problem is one of the wires leading to the coil had come loose. And in handling it, both wires ended up coming off, and I was unable to reattach them. So at that time, I couldn't repair the clock. And that was back in July of 2022. So that's close to 2.5 years ago. So I put it aside and was hoping to find another one, or perhaps something the same size to replace it with. And eventually I came across just a clock movement in a different thrift store. It looked like it could fit, and it turns out I was correct. And the label on that one, it didn't have a case, it was just the movement. It was a Lincoln, which I had never heard of that manufacturer before. But when I opened it up, I discovered that it was powered by a Sessions motor. In fact, the whole movement was Sessions. But I was able to get it into here. The hardest part was the fact that the threaded stems that secure it to the back plate didn't line up with the existing holes. So I had to drill new holes in here to get it to fit. But over time, what began to happen was the Sessions motor got noisy. And the problem I have learned with Sessions clocks is that you can't open up the motors to take them apart, to clean and lubricate them. Once they get noisy, you're kind of stuck. I started to look for some non-working Sessions clocks and discovered most of the ones that were non-working, the issue was the fact that the problem was the motor, which wasn't working. So I wasn't able to use any of those to try to repair it. And I ended up looking for what was obviously labeled as a working Sessions clock. And the problem I ran into with those is, although they were running, those two were also noisy. And I think it's just an inherent problem with Sessions clocks. I'm pretty much done with them for now. But however, I do like the look of the clock. I'd like to have it up and running. And one thing that I've never done, and I've seen others do it, is they'll find a nice old clock like this that they can't repair, and they'll replace the whole thing with a quartz movement, which is something I've never done nor wanted to do. But in this case, what I actually came across was a quartz clock, and I took the motor out of it. Just a regular quartz clock, except this one is a sweep second movement. That is, instead of having that little noisy tick, tick, tick of the second hand, it's quiet and it sweeps evenly, moving, looking just like a regular electric clock. So I'm hoping to, at least for the time being, get this in here until I can actually find a proper mechanism to replace it with. One issue I have is this came out of a clock that had some really large hands, so I'm going to have to rummage through my collection and see if I can get some that will fit here. And let me start to open this up and get started on it. Oh, and I should mention, the only reason I'm even considering this is, if you think about it, one problem with a quartz movement locked inside a case like this is when the battery dies, you have to open it up to replace the battery, which is kind of a pain. However, I came across a way to convert this into an electric quartz clock. And what it is it's a plug, and at the other end is a connector that looks like a AA battery, which will fit in here. And once you plug this in, it'll just run. So that's my plan. And as I said, let me start to get ready to open this up. To do that, I have to remove the screws holding the back plate on. I have several of them here. There's 1, 2, 3, and 3 more down here. And 1 more. Okay, let's put this aside. Now to remove the clock from the back plate, there's a couple of nuts holding the whole mechanism in place here. And we'll see how tight they are. Okay, so what I want to keep is the dial. I'm going to remove the entire mechanism. A couple of screws here and nuts to undo. Let me take a closer look at that, figure out how I want to do it, and then we'll continue here. Okay, the first thing is, let me remove the wire. Okay. Now, to remove the dial, first I need to remove the hands, which should come off pretty easily, as I've already had them off in the past. So, let's see if I can do it by hand. There's 1, 2, not bad. Now the dial, I should be able to just ease this off. There's a fold here holding it in place. There we go. Okay. Next, there are, let's see, I got 1 screw here, which I think should remove the whole thing. So let's see what happens when I undo it, even though I've took it apart a long time ago. Don't ask me to remember what I did. And that's what I wanted. This we're going to get rid of. And the plan is to position this through here. And what I need to do, first of all, I have this lock washer, or nut rather, which when this goes through here, that's what's going to secure it. And it's a nice bright silver. I think I'm going to paint it black. It'll blend in more nicely with the numbers on the dial. And then this is sticking way too far out from the front of the dial. So I'm going to have to try to find some kind of washers to place in between the dial and the quartz movement. So maybe just a little bit of it will be showing through. So let me try to come up with those parts, and then I'll continue. I'll also work on painting the nut. And another thing I'm realizing is I will still need to use part of this. I'm going to have to remove the motor and just use this plate, which contains, actually I think it's just going to be this, maybe all that I need. I stand corrected. These 2 threaded stems is what's going to hold the back of the plate in position. So the clock will be inserted in here, and this will be reattached that way, and everything should stay in position. I'll know for sure once I actually reassemble everything, but as I said, let me get back to work on all of this. What I've come up with, instead of using a washer to act as a spacer, I'll use another one of these nuts that hold the quartz clocks to the dial. Let's get this over here. Now I can slip this through here, put the dial back on, and it leaves just enough threads for the other nut to fit over it, which I've painted black. And that's not such a bad look. I also came up with some hands. I have a minute hand, an hour hand, and for the seconds. And then what I wanted to check was to make sure there's going to be enough clearance between the hands and the glass. So all I had to do really was to seat the minute hand, rather second hand rather, place the glass over it to see if it's touching anywhere. And what I discovered was that there was a little bit of contact at the edge of the glass, so I just had to gently bend down the second hand just a little bit. But I think everything's going to work out quite well. So the next step is to pretty much put everything back together. Let's see how I can set this up. That usually works well. Place the glass. I have the plate and the dial labeled, so the 12 I know sits in this position. And I want to seat the quartz so that the battery is at the 6 o'clock. Right like that. Okay, next, to place the hands, start with the hour hand at the 12. And then the minute hand. Oh, you know what? There we go. And the second hand. And this. Now one thing I have to do here is remove the power cord from this back plate. Take out the knot. this cord has to be popped into here, and this is the positive. It sits like this. Now I won't be able to pass this wire through this grommet here, so I have to remove it. I'm not sure how easy that will be, so give me a moment to work on that. I wasn't able to remove this, but what I did was I put a little cut in it, and I placed a knot in the wire down here, and I think I can pass this through the cut. And that just might do it. Line this up. And if everything's lined up properly, that should do it. So I'm only going to put in a couple of screws initially to hold this in because I want to make sure it's working. I have to remove the back to set this up where I want it and then set the time. So let me do that on my own. It's back in the case. I've only secured it with 3 of the 6 screws that it takes. What I want to do now is let's plug it in and see if it runs. There you go. Now the main problem with this is I have to find a place to set it up, and I'm going to have to take the back off, plug it in, set the time, and then put the plate back on. At this point, twice a year, I would probably have to undo it to change the time when you get to daylight savings time. But hopefully, if what I'm reading is correct, in the next year or two, they may do away with that. And that way this can stay plugged in year round. Anyway, let me find a spot to set it up and I'll give it a final look. Okay, I have it up and running. It's got the correct time and I'm pretty happy that I get to look at this clock again. I'm not real happy that I had to put a quartz movement into it. However, the fact that it's a sweep second hand, if you didn't know what I went through to do this, one would never know. However, I will continue to look for a proper motor to put into this clock, and if I get lucky and come across one, I'll make a video showing me restoring this back to hopefully its original state. If anyone knows of any New Haven clocks, I would be very happy to hear from you, and I've been looking for one of these for a long time. This is the only one that I've ever seen, and that pretty much wraps things up. Bye for now.